Women are only allowed to have authority and credibility if it has been granted to them by systems of power. Okay, a university, a credential, a title, a corporation, a professional designation, a church, a husband or a father when you're a girl, or a prestigious institution of some kind. And what this means is, and this is so important really, not only generally as a woman, okay, but also when it comes to your career. So many of you are obviously in corporate environments, okay, whereby authority and credibility are essential. You have to learn how to, okay, become authoritative and how to create credibility so that you can navigate your workplace environment. I'm actually really love talking about this stuff because my background is in selling, coaching, training, facilitation in the cultural transformation, the leadership development space for nearly 10 years now. All right. And this is one of the areas that women struggle with the most. Okay, because there's a lot of invisible contracts that women inherit from girlhood around authority and credibility. And you need those two things to progress in any career. In any career. You need those two things even to build a personal brand. So if you are somebody who is seeking to build a personal brand within your workplace environment, because personal brands aren't just people being online and creating content, right? Personal brands are needed in the workplace. And in fact, when you look at the research and stats, more and more organizations, although it's slow, but the more forward-thinking organizations are actually recognizing how important employee brands are. It's funny actually because obviously in the height of DEI, one of the things that was often discussed was employee activism. Well, we're really very much in the era of employee brands. Have you noticed there are a lot of brands of all kinds who now have far more of their senior members of staff who are building brands on social media? One of my favorite brands, of course, is Marks and Spencer's. Love Marks and Spencer's. It was my second retail job, but my most important retail job in my teens. Loved Marks and Spencer's. Big fan of Marks and Spencer's. It's probably one of the only things I miss about the UK, quite frankly, is going into a Marks and Spencer's. The retail experience is above, okay? Sorry for the people who like Waitrose, but Marks and Spencer's is better than Waitrose. And if you are in the US, it's actually really difficult to say what Marks and Spencer's is similar to, maybe a Whole Foods. So here's the deal. Okay, here's the deal. You need, okay, to have authority. You need to embody authority, and you need to be very confident about your credibility, and you need to create credibility in the workplace environment. Okay, now this can be very challenging. Very challenging, but it's something that is important for women to develop. Now, if you're a single woman in particular and you're building your career and you really want to go that route, this is important. This is part of the capital that you as a single woman have to develop, because authority and credibility leads to opportunities. Authority and credibility actually smooths the way for opportunities to come your way. And when you're a single woman, you are the sole income generator in your home. One thing we always need to do is make sure we know how to look after ourselves. And credibility and authority are key. But these are some of the most powerful invisible contracts that hold women back in the workplace environment, but also outside in the world more generally. And if you are a woman who has been brought up to believe that your authority and credibility comes from some of these places, these systems of power, agents of system of power that I listed, then you, in the day and age we live in, you're going to be missing out on opportunities, number one. Okay? Because we don't need to be playing by these rules. There are quicker, easier ways for us to get to where we want to when we are willing to break these invisible contracts and assume authority and create credibility in our careers, but also in our personal lives. Okay, so one of the things you have to do away with is believing that institutions and gatekeepers are the ones that are your throughway to your authority and your credibility, because they are not. And let me give you an example that, because obviously this is my work. Okay. So although my workplace is the World Wide Web quite often, at the moment, the other day I posted a TikTok video, and it was a video about loneliness and the threat of loneliness that is often the threat of loneliness for single women. Okay, you'll hear quite often people will say you're going to be lonely if you stay single as a woman. So my entire video was about what loneliness actually is and how multifaceted loneliness actually is. I do believe I wrote a Substack on this actually. I'm not sure if I've done a YouTube video on loneliness and women as yet. No, I'm not sure. But I wrote a whole Substack about this. Anyway, I did the TikTok video, but the video title for that video was You Will Regret Being Lonely as a 30-something woman. Don't quote me, but it was a statement where I literally was directly saying you will be lonely and you will regret it as a single woman. But of course, my entire video, which was about 4 minutes long, was refuting that and laying out the facts as to why that might not necessarily be the case, right? Loneliness is a human experience, actually, and every human being experiences loneliness at some point in their life. So it's not a question of if you'll ever be lonely, it's more a question of how you're going to navigate it when you do experience it. And also, there's lots of evidence that shows us that it's not inherently linked to your marital status. So that was the video, 4 minutes. Anyway, I think a day goes by, maybe 2 days goes by, and I'm notified about a comment. And the individual said, this is such a bizarre and clickbait video title. That's what the comment said. Now, I didn't respond to the comment. I don't respond to all comments. One, because I'm wiser than that. And two, because I don't always actually have the time. At this point, there are hundreds of comments every single day. Okay. And those are just the ones I'm notified of. It doesn't actually represent all of the comments underneath all of my videos, right? Bearing in mind, I probably only missed maybe 8 weeks of posting since I started on TikTok back in September 2025. So there's a load of videos on there that people still comment on. So I didn't respond to this comment, but I saw somebody else respond to the comment, and they responded with something along the lines of, that's what helps people stop scrolling on the feed, right? Is having a video title like that. And then the original commenter went back and said, well, I'm a journalist and a scholar, so I don't agree basically with her video title. Now, here's something interesting. At that point, I did respond, and I simply said, look, my work is not about, no, I literally said something along the lines of, I'm interested in reaching people, not reproducing academic narratives. The reason why I mentioned academic narratives is because the original commentator said she was a scholar and a journalist, hence why she had criticized the video title. Now, at this point, let's be very clear. I'm not invested in the fact that she disagreed with the title. It's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not life and death. And my work inherently requires me to analyze and criticize systems. That's what I do. And I am used to people disagreeing with me. In fact, disagreement sharpens me. So I wasn't bothered by the fact that she decided or felt that the video title was, as she described it, clickbait and bizarre. Now, bearing in mind, it's pretty standard. If you've ever been on TikTok, when people are doing, I'm a talking head format content person, right? I don't do dances, lip syncing. I'm literally talking head like this with a video title right at the top of my head and captions. So basic, so bread and butter. So if you've ever been on TikTok, people put video titles. That's how it works, right? And I wouldn't describe that as clickbait necessarily, but she's entitled to her opinion. Now, here's the funny thing. She came back to my comment and said, I'm not talking about academics, but Godspeed if you want to rage bait people. And she said something around, this is not good information, and basically questioned my ethics in relation to the video title. Now, I love a moment like that. because what it revealed was this invisible contract around authority and credibility. Now, the commentator obviously backtracked and then said I was being rage bait. But the reason why I mentioned academic narrative was because, of course, she referred to the fact that she was a scholar and journalist, and that's why she was criticizing my video title. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I've never said that I'm a scholar. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a professor. I'm not an activist. I'm not a therapist. I've never claimed to be those things. But I don't need to be any of those things in order to take up space on the World Wide Web and share my ideas, my thoughts, and my research. Yeah, my work is born out of lived experience, observation, conversations with hundreds of women. My senior level professional experience working with C-suites, leadership teams, operating boards, committees, and coaching, training, facilitating for nearly 10 years, right? I don't need to be a professor. I don't need any PhDs. I don't need to be kind of granted a seal of approval by gatekeepers and institutions to be able to show up like this and share ideas and thoughts. Now, and on top of that, the funny thing is that knowing how to communicate, knowing how to keep people engaged, knowing how to distribute your ideas, which is ironic because it's one of the things that when you look at a lot of educational and academic institutions, there's so many ideas that never make it outside of those walls. Why? Because they don't know how to distribute their ideas. All right? And equally, as a woman, you don't need permission to share your ideas and thoughts. And what I find quite often is that what rattles people more is not really what I'm saying. It's the fact that I have the gumption to say, this is what I think, and this is how I'm going to communicate it. All right. So this happens everywhere. And here's the other ironic part of this is that education has been historically exclusive and has excluded women all over the world. In fact, right now, there are places in the world like Afghanistan where girls are being excluded legally, might I add, from being educated. Okay, and then on top of that, now a lot of these educational institutions they have their own hierarchies. They have their own invisible contracts that impact women, that impact people of color, that impact people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They're full of invisible contracts in academia, whether you're a student or one of the faculty members. And yet here was a woman who levied her credibility and therefore authority to give criticism. She's entitled to have an opinion on the title, but when I picked her up on it, said, no, that's got nothing to do with it. And then doubled down and said that actually my title was rage bait and wasn't kind of in good faith. She's entitled to her opinion. Okay? But here is the point. Credentials are only one form of authority. Authority and credentials aren't the same thing either. Okay? There's something called contribution-based authority. You think about founders, writers, speakers, artists of all kinds, creators, community builders. These all have got authority. They've built authority outside of these traditional mechanisms. All right. So authority can emerge from contribution. It can emerge from places that are not necessarily approved of or have been given a certain stamp of institutional approval. That also don't include certification. Wisdom is not an automatic result of knowledge. There are lots of people who are knowledgeable, but they're not wise. And like I say, they may not also have the skill of communication, the skill of articulation, the skill of distribution, because that is a skill. Now, this is very important for women in the workplace environment to understand, because a lot of you think that because maybe you're lacking in certain credentials, certifications, you think it's another qualification. No. Not when it comes to authority. And authority will get you very far in your career. It will get you very far in your career. That is the way you can navigate a lot of these stakeholders within organizations, is when you embody authority. Now, yes, sometimes there's a certain level of credentialing that is needed. I mean, of course, if you want to be a doctor, a surgeon, a lawyer, an accountant, well, we do need those individuals to be credentialed, okay? Because of the nature of what they do. But what I'm talking about here is how you navigate these workplace environments, so that stretch assignments are given to you, so that opportunities that are off books, you're told about before they even get announced. Now, I know that there are a lot of dynamics and office politics when it comes to the corporate workplace for women in general. And then if you look at intersectionality, yes, there's quite, but I'm telling you that one of the biggest ones that holds women back is authority and credibility. And what you have to do is realize that you can decide to create that authority in yourself. Okay. I often talk about the difference between competence and confidence. Confidence is very transitory. It's like a feather in the wind. It doesn't always show up when you need it to. Whereas competence, you see, there's authority in competence. Now, use your critical thinking. I'm not saying if you're head down, you work hard, you'll always get what you want, you'll always get promoted and noticed. No, 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 no. I'm saying there's a way you use and leverage authority. And that requires you not to ask for permission, not to wait for permission, and not to shrink, even when other people say, I've got more qualifications than you, so I have a right to tell you what I think. I have a right to criticize you. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Authority comes from it comes from multiple places. It can emerge. And contribution matters. I can tell you, contribution matters. Because if I look back at my history, yes, it's true, I have had more than a basic education. That is true, right? I went to university. I've done part of a master's that I needed to do for the career I was in at the time. I've done multiple other training experiences, practical trainings for coaching and etc over the years. What I'm saying though is actually the majority of the money I've made and the main way I have positioned myself, and now I'm trusted by CEOs, I'm trusted by chief people officers, head of learning and talent. The reason why is authority. I do not allow this supposed certification business. No, 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 no. Okay? It is important that you understand that what you could, and you know what? Let me tell you something actually. Authority, okay, and the credibility that comes from embodied authority in practice, it can take you so far. It is the equalizer. Because let me tell you something, like I said, there are many people with certifications, many people who've studied this, that, but they're still foolish. They are not wise. And they also don't have certain skills like distribution, like marketing, self-promotion. That is why you see sometimes there are people who've been promoted and you think, well, hold on a minute. They've not worked in this sector as long as I have. They haven't got as many qualifications as I've got. They haven't worked as hard as I have. But guess what? They've got these other skills. They understand how to embody authority and leverage that for credibility. And as a woman, that is key. And like I say, it's not always in relation to other men, because you know what? We could all sit here and talk about the ways that men may undermine your authority and your credibility. We can talk about that on a systemic level, on an interpersonal level all day. But what I'm talking about here is often in the workplace, it shows up. And let me also tell you this from my experience of doing this work for nearly 10 years in corporate environments. When you speak to a lot of women who've got into certain places in their career, almost always there has been a man that has either sponsored them or mentored them or given them some assistance along the way. Okay? And so this is why I bring up this example with another woman asserting her so-called authority over the conversation. Because, as I say, it happens between women as well. Who are you to talk about this? You know, it's so funny because even when you think about it, our great-great-grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, depending on what your background is, yeah, these are women who had immense wisdom, right? You look at certain indigenous groups and communities, the wisdom that they have about a multitude of things. They didn't go to the top universities in the world. So credentials and qualifications are not the only way that you can build authority and embody authority and therefore be credible. Our grandmothers, our great grandmothers passed down a lot of the time wisdom. Okay, and they come from eras depending on where they were born and the time that where they could not be educated in formal institutions. That did not mean they were stupid people. So it's very important for you to remember these things and approach your career in a certain way. 9 times out of 10, especially in the society we're living in now with artificial intelligence, social media, the workforce is looking very different. The old rules are not always applying, if they ever did, to certain groups of people. But what makes a difference is authority. And you've got to stand in your authority. And obviously you need to be competent. Okay, that helps, but that is really important. Okay, so it can be very uncomfortable sometimes for other people, especially other women. They come across a woman like me, and here's what I will share with you is that, look, I don't meet the beauty standard. I don't leverage beauty. I don't do beauty, makeup, dancing, fashion. I'm not a mother, because baby content and mother content is very popular, right? I'm not getting married. So proposal content, engagement content, wedding content, some of the most popular content on the World Wide Web. Okay, if you ever want to be accepted, celebrated, recognized by other women, get married, get engaged, or be on the search to find your husband, because people love that type of content. Dating. Yeah? I don't do any of those things. I don't fit squarely into that. Then I'm also not dancing. I'm not talking. Do you see where I'm coming from? And then people find me usually through TikTok, now YouTube, and I usually don't have any makeup on. My hair's natural. I'm any old girl, right? I'm not particularly soft voiced. I don't mince my words. I'm not really doing empowering content. I don't tell women you are amazing. That's not my thing. So I don't fit into any of the boxes neatly. And quite often people can't place me. They don't know necessarily what my cultural ethnic background is. In detail, that is. Obviously, it's clear that I'm a black woman, but apart from that, they can't tell. They don't know what. It's so funny. The other day, this is something I get often. Someone said to me, "I thought you were married all this time," right? People can't often categorize me because actually, technically speaking, I'm not necessarily playing any of the algorithms. And then, of course, maybe they come onto my page and they think, "Oh, goodness." So what happens is sometimes when people can't place you in certain places, they wonder, where does her authority come from? When I've always been this way, to be honest, I can't help it. I walk into rooms and people ask me where things are, like I know. I've only just got here. It is a presence. It's an energy that I have. Okay. And it's one that I'm now allowing myself to use online. All right. I'm now allowing myself to use it online. And that can be felt often through the screen. And that can be a little bit disorientating for other women. Hence why they may choose to rely on their credentials to assert some kind of authority. When anybody who's done anybody who knows anything about marketing, self-promotion and distribution knows that you have to be able to reach people. You have to engage them. That is a skill in itself. And so, yes, I choose my video titles accordingly, but I definitely would not classify that as rage bait at all. And it's not in bad faith, but that's just my personal opinion. The point is, authority can emerge in different ways. Okay. And unless you choose, as I always say, to claim your authority, it can be very difficult to break the invisible contracts that are governing your life. And in this session, your career. All right. It's really, really important for you to understand that so that you can, as I say, make progress in your career. And I obviously get a lot of questions around career stuff because generally speaking, especially when it comes to single women, what the research is showing me is that typical paid employment is key for a lot of single women because of the infrastructure that it actually provides you with. Okay. those of us who work for ourselves, that comes with inherent risks. You've got to have a certain risk appetite, because actually infrastructure is not set up for single women who are single income generators in their households. It's really not. Okay. And so typical paid employment can actually fill in a lot of the gaps for a lot of women. And we see from the research that this is one of the reasons why single women in particular are choosing to remain in typical paid employment. They may have a side hustle on the side, but actually their paid employment provides them with some foundation. And that is why, of course, I decided to answer that question around how to navigate often the corporate environment. And, authority and credibility is a huge part of this. Now, I do cover this in the Invisible Contract Audit workbook. It's somewhere above or below. You can check out that guide and get yourself started on identifying these invisible contracts.